Alrighty, if you haven't already, please make sure that you have sent me your arguments that you have constructed sometime today, if possible. That way I can copy and paste everybody's arguments to each other, and then you can practice writing rebuttals against what other people are, claiming, backing up with their grounds, warrants, etc. And that way we can finish that off for today. But today's lecture, our final lecture here, because this is our last day of camp. Now, although this is the last day of the camp, it doesn't mean that you can stop. By all means, I strongly encourage you to continue pursuing any of these events, and we're going to go into much more detail about how to prep and what to do to kind of start with this until we start jumping into the regular season here. So, like we said, we're going to go over speech and debate, the arguments, and how they apply to each debate and the events themselves. So, like we said, we're working into the season. Starting, late August, early September, we're going to hit the ground running because other schools, by now, have already started school. And they either have a class where the students come in every day and work, or they have practices in which the students come in and work. Either way, some people see us as kind of at a disadvantage at the moment because we're, a week or 2 weeks behind other teams. But don't worry about any of that. That's more of a me worry than a you worry, because I've worked it out so that by our first tournament, and we'll get to that in a minute, you'll be prepped, you'll be ready to go, and you should be at least instilled with enough confidence that you will be successful. Now, applying and adapting arguments is kind of what we've been working on here this entire time, or at least over these past couple of days. Now, there are the 3 debates that you kind of looked at for examples and references for. And what we've been trying to do is get you basically working on the basics and kind of building from there, because you will approach, whether it's LD, public forum, or policy, if you're interested, you'll see that you'll take exactly what we've been doing with our claim, with our grounds, with our warrant, with backing, etc., and they will apply to each one of these debates. But what differs each of these debates from each other is how you apply and adapt the arguments. For example, Lincoln-Douglas debate, or LD, is about morality. What is right and what is wrong? So, for example, think of this. Ponder, if you will. Is it justified to sacrifice one person to save hundreds, thousands, or even millions of other lives? So you have to ponder there. You think for a second, well, yeah, that's only one person as opposed to 100, 1,000, a million, Proctor. Why wouldn't that be justified? But the problem is, look at the perspective of that one person. Or think about what is it that we're sacrificing. So think of it like our rights. So you have the right to bear arms. You have the right to publicly address this, that, and another. You have the right to, the freedom of speech, or all these other freedoms. Is it fair, or is it justified to take away the rights of one person in order to justify it for hundreds, thousands, millions? LD debate is all about this type of thinking and this type of arguing. So, for instance, if we look at this specific resolution or the topic that we're discussing, in the United States, so in the U.S., colleges and universities ought not consider, or they shouldn't recognize or address standardized tests in undergraduate admission decisions. So what this is arguing is, in the United States, colleges and universities, when it comes to accepting and not accepting students, they should not let standardized tests, so what you get on the ACT, how you score on end of course exams, which all freshmen will take in at least English and I believe math and maybe even science at the end of this school year. So that score right there, our school keeps it on record. And then when you graduate, universities ask for that score. And you'll also take one, I believe, your sophomore year, and there's one more, I believe, your senior year that you'll take. So those scores are considered whether or not you should or should not be accepted to Mizzou, to Northwest Missouri State University, to Brown, to Texas A&M, whatever university it may be. Even community colleges have these admission guidelines. You must meet insert criteria in order to be, accepted into our program or our college or university. So this is arguing, one side is saying, those standardized tests that everybody hates, that nobody likes to take, that are boring, yeah, we shouldn't consider those. And so the debate then comes to, why is that justified? And you have to convince your audience that, we should get rid of these standardized tests when it comes to the decision-making process. Or the other side is saying, no, we need those tests because they're important. And now we have a line drawn in this debate. And you need to argue one or the other and why it's justified. Morally speaking, why should we get rid of it, or why should we keep it? In public forum, it's focusing on impacts and effects. So an impact is an aftermath of what just happened. So if it helps you think of impact like a meteor hits the earth, there's an impact. What's the impact? It's that crater. It's what's happened because of the meteorite. And that's exactly what an impact is. If we don't act now, insert problem or insert solution is going to happen. That is what an impact is. It can be positive and negative. And then that's where the effects come in as well. So what and who is going to be affected by this decision? So it all boils down to, should we or shouldn't we do insert action here? And they tend to be pretty cut and dry. So for instance, the European Union, or the EU, should join the Belt and Road Initiative. What the Belt and Road Initiative is basically China is going to build a big road straight through Europe and Asia. And they're going to establish business connections to other countries. And or boating routes along the coast, establishing business connections. So it's going to benefit China a lot. But the question is this going to benefit the EU? Yes or no? Or in this case, should or should not the EU participate in this? And it's pretty easy, because all you have to do is understand what the Belt and Road Initiative is, and I've pretty much just told you that. And now it's figuring out and asking questions. Well, I know this is beneficial to China, but how is it to the EU? And is there positive or negative impacts if we allow this to happen? Or what are going to be the long-term and short-term effects if we pass this? And then last but not least, policy is all about procedure, steps. First we do this, then we do this. So looking at it, this is how we solve an issue. I have a problem, it needs to be solved. Okay, well, by doing this, or insert your plan, this is how we solve this issue. So the United States federal government, so our federal government, should substantially means extremely reduce, or to a large amount, we need to reduce direct commercial sales and or foreign military sales of arms from the US or the United States. Meaning we should severely reduce the amount of sales that we do to other countries. And more specifically, this is talking about guns. This is talking about weapons. This is talking about ammunition. Planes, tanks, etc. Why should we reduce this? So prove to me that there's a problem with the United States giving guns to other countries. Common sense, if you look into the Middle East, about, sadly, 85% of those issues in the Middle East we've caused, or we have some dealings with one way or the other. So you're looking at it through that perspective. Here's some bad things that are happening right now, but how do we solve it? Your answer is by reducing what we sell and how we sell and who do we sell to. And you just simply figure out a couple of examples. So maybe Saudi Arabia. Maybe we should really reduce the amount of money and the amount of tanks and the amount of weapons that we're giving to Saudi Arabia, and that's our plan. Why is this going to solve the issue? Well, Saudi Arabia is kind of doing some bad things right now, and if we reduce the amount of weapons we give them, it will in turn reduce the damage that they're doing in the Middle East. And then you simply have to defend that. And the other side listens to that argument and says, that's not going to solve anything. And then you attack their plan or their solution And that's what policy boils down to. It's just step 1, 2, and 3, and that's how it's going to solve it. And the negative is saying, no, that's wrong, and let me tell you how we're going to solve it, or don't listen to them, Judge. They're not going to solve this issue, and here's why. So that is how it boils it down, and how you take these arguments and you adapt them depending upon which debate event you choose.